following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio streaming and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. Tonight, well, we continue the conversation with the Bubbleheads. Now, we're gonna stay on topic this episode. Last episode, we tried to talk about conflict and our history with conflict. It turned into an accidental Pride Month episode. Happy Pride, everybody. This episode, we're continuing talking about the purposes of conflict, why we fight. And this is leading up to a workshop we are doing this weekend, Sunday, June 25th. I hope I have that right. I'm doing it from memory. June 25th. Yes, Sunday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, completely online. Please join us. You can go to nottherapyshow.com for information and to go to tickets. Space is limited. We have about 15 tickets left right now, only 15. So if you want to join us, sign up right now when you're listening to it. All right, conflict and why we fight. I'm here once again with 3 of the 4 Bubbleheads. We've got Akila, Jake, and Mary just with us. And I want to talk about why we fight, because it's different for everyone. And the purposes of conflict for each individual is very important to identify, because if you don't have a goal, if you don't have an endpoint, you can't map the path to get to your destination. So Mary Just, we're going to start with you because we went to you last show. What is the purpose of conflict for you?
Different things, and depending on the situation, because it takes 2 to tango, right? And when conflict occurs, it is because you have 2 different or perceived different approaches meeting in the middle and trying to push one way or another. You can have a conflict that is born out of miscommunication, and therefore there is a misunderstanding. And so what is currently happening may not actually be what is actually happening. But that's the point. That is the point where you have to analyze, okay, what is exactly going on here? Is the person telling me this actually saying this, or are they, 1, saying it in a way that is not getting their meaning across? 2, am I misunderstanding on my end because I have an assumption about what the context and meaning of some of the terms that they're using is? Because that can happen, especially if I have native proficiency in English, but every now and again I Ricky Ricardo.
Ricky Ricardo.
I Ricky Ricardo.
I thought you're Lucy. I'm Ricky.
you got something to explain to me then. And because and there are different styles of communication. I can't remember an exact example right now, but my husband and I have had disagreements where, of course, when you're in the moment and the tempers flare, you're not thinking clearly. So you have to find coping mechanisms or interruption mechanisms to make the anger go down or display, so that you can sit down and ask, okay, when you say this, what exactly are you meaning by this? Because a couple of times it has happened and I go, so in Ecuador, that's not the meaning that we ascribe to this type of idiom. And so that that's so the conflict there, in that sense, it can be good because it forces a reevaluation of of the communication standards. Like, are we using clear language, or are we speaking from our own metaphor, from each of our metaphor families, and we don't have a common, and the way that they're configured are not compatible. So I need to find a way to make an equivalent so I understand what you're actually saying. Because that's another thing. There's a book by Tim Bird called I think it's The Secrets of Story, which is a very, very good book for writers. But he talks about, in one section, he talks about writing dialogue and writing characters who have metaphor families. And by that, he means that every region, every country, every profession, and for example, every faith group, every, even within counties and countries, you have every suburban entity, and every neighborhood or whatever can have its own metaphor families. They handle language in a specific way that in many ways can help you pinpoint where they come from, what they do for work, or things of that sort.
And like the canoe metaphor that Aquila did not get.
The canoe metaphor. Yeah. And you see, and that's the funny thing, because I'm an Ecuadorian, and I live in Colorado, and then I lived in and previous to that, I lived in North Carolina. There is no reason why I should get that metaphor. But I went to Warren Wilson College in Asheville, North Carolina, which is the hippie college. And there I was kind of made honorary lesbian because there were no gay men around. And I was kind of adopted by the lesbians in the fishbowl. And yes, the fishbowl was the area of the dining hall where all the lesbians gathered. And yes, it was intentionally called the fishbowl by them.
Oh, God.
I know.
So were you the fish in the Cat in the Hat? Or
I guess.
like, I don't know. I'm just imagining this whole like reverse eunuch setup. This is something like, well, this is a sci-fi short story in the making.
Yeah, I know.
It's like Link going into the Gerudo village where he has to dress like a woman. This is what's going on. That's a Legend of Zelda reference, everybody.
Yes.
I think the point's made. I just dropped a bunch of metaphors that half the audience is not going to get.
Well, it makes sense, but because of that, because I didn't have, I came from Ecuador, fresh off the banana boat from Ecuador, and yes, bananas are one of Ecuador's biggest exports. Fresh off the boat, I wanted to kind of, have my own experience outside of restrictive Catholic country, have a relationship, live the gay lifestyle. And of course, I ended up choosing the one gay-friendly city in North Carolina that is full of lesbians and hardly any gay men, to the point that everybody jokes that Asheville should be called New Lesbos. There were at the time when I went to college there were 4 lesbian bars and only 1 gay bar.
This explains some of my experiences in North Carolina. Because normally when I'm cosplaying Ivy Valentine from Soul Calibur, women kind of give me the stink eye and avoid me. But North Carolina was the most friendly convention with women when I was in that cosplay. I'm now totally redefining the experience and what it meant in my head.
If you want to find the gay men, they're all in Charlotte. They're barricaded there. I didn't know that.
We were there too. Okay.
But
because gay men love that character. Now I understand the okay. My boss at the time, a guy by the name of Alex McCrease, you've seen him on my YouTube channel. He had me and another host named Trish show up as Ivy Valentine and Tifa Lockhart, both characters that play with both groups.
Yep.
Yep.
I don't know if that was instinct or dark genius. It could be both with Alex, but now I understand. All right. Okay. I learned something today.
And so because of my, because I didn't quite exactly have the gay boy coming out experience, because the moment I came to the college, I went, I'm out. Nobody cared because it was the hippie college. My first experience coming to Warren Wilson College, my parents were dropping me off. And as they were driving up to the college, this college was divided by a little highway. and the crossing light turned on. So we stopped, and a gaggle of naked women, painted green from head to toe, wearing fairy wings and glitter, ran across the intersection. And I went, okay, this is the school I'm going to.
Yep.
And that was the school pagans who were doing some celebration.
Okay. Now, what did your parents do when they saw that?
My mom thought it was the greatest thing ever. My dad went, what was that? And I went, oh, Dad.
Yeah. I don't think that's what he was saying in his head, knowing your dad. Yeah.
I can assure you that was not.
Yeah.
That was not.
Yeah.
But so because I was kind of like the one of the three gay boys on campus, the lesbians adopted me, and I kind of learned the ways of the Birkenstock with them for 3 years of the 4 years I was there. I was part of the LGBTQ alliance. For 2 semesters, I was president there, which was basically just me and a whole bunch of lesbians doing stuff, because the gay boys, I was the only one who was actually doing stuff. The other ones were like, and I was the one with them going, we need to go to this protest, we need to organize this, etc. So I learned to work with the lesbian student body quite well. And so I realized that in many ways my experience is very, very different. And it was shaped just because of where I went to school.
That's so different though, because so much of that is, I mean, in what's not said, and people are supposed to know why someone's mad at you, and that was the thing I was terrible at. I never know when someone's mad at me. Did you feel that kind of culture shock of all of a sudden there was all this unsaid stuff?
It's interesting because it never happened to me, but I could tell, but it happened between them a lot.
Yeah.
I remember the only person who didn't do that was Jen. She nicknamed herself Crazy Jen. She was awesome. She wore rainbow. She dyed her hair all the colors of the rainbow, and she would wear these very short rainbow tutus and rainbow stockings, and she would. Oh, poor Jen. No, and the one thing that she was not entirely very self-aware of is she would draw with chalk in front of the lunch hall to tell people when the next meeting of the alliance was. Mm-hmm. And she had a tendency to bend over in a tutu with her butt towards the fishbowl because it was full of glass. And my friend Sharon would turn around and she would go, she was kind of a Rosie O'Donnell type personality. Mm-hmm. And you could hear her through the glass. She went, Jen, stop bending up. And it was this just foghorn that echoed throughout the entire cafeteria. And it was like, God.
This is why a lot of ladies who are attracted to ladies have a 2-week supply of bike shorts in their closet. Okay, so we slipped back into Pride Month territory. Good time for a break. When we come back, we're going to go to Jake talking about what conflict does for Jake, and then Akila, and then me on this episode of The Purposes of Conflict on It's Not Therapy in support of our workshop on Sunday, June 25th, 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, completely online. So wherever you're listening, you can join us. NotTherapyShow.com. NotTherapyShow.com will take you to tickets, or if you want to leave a question or comment or anything like that, we love feedback. Until then, stay tuned. After this break, we will be right back. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're still talking about the purposes of conflict. What does conflict do with the Bubbleheads? Mary Jess talked before the break. Mary Jess is a fantastic storyteller. His stories always go in unpredictable places. And now we're going to move on to Jake. Jake is from a different part of the world. He has a different set of circumstances. And so he probably has a different reason for fighting. Jake, take it away. What does conflict do for you?
So conflict, I would say that the main forms of conflict that I've ever had to deal with is professional conflict and then medical conflict in the form of having to actually have fights in regards to medical treatment for my mother.
Fighting the system, yeah.
Yeah. So professional wise, I've had many arguments with people in regards to how to improve either customer service or this how to improve general working conditions for people, because we all know, because I work customer face and therefore we get abuse all the time, and trying to pinpoint actual right when they cross this line we are done, or when they cross this line we can put them on a timeout, or we can do this, because there is a expectation. I'm not saying it with actual people because that will depend on the time of day, the phase of the moon, and what sort of crystals they have been rubbing that day. Literally, it doesn't matter what. Someone's going to have a bad day. So what it should come down to is, what is our policy? And they always go, well, you shouldn't reach that point in the first place. You should be de-escalating. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. While also rubbing two... Sorry, I was about to go into an Irish metaphor there, but it would get completely
I think
lost.
I know the one you're talking about.
Yep. But in those sort of situations, I believe I have a good idea. They have never given me reasons as to why it was not credible or anything like that, but it was always treated as it's the way we do things, or it's not my fight, or it's not it's not my job to handle this, but it is your job to pass it up the chain. I can't do it. There's a chain of command here. If I go above you, you get mad. Therefore, I go to you and you don't do nothing. So that's the form of the disputes I generally deal with when it comes to a professional one. Of course, you have a staff member between staff member, but I find that those usually degenerate into high school drama bullshit too many times to talk.
Do you think that's because everybody's so overextended from dealing with the public that they don't have any spoons left?
I think it's actually more in the sense of they are taking out their frustrations from management onto someone that could actually not fight back, because a lot of people you either looking at management in the form of that is where I want to be, or that is who I am afraid of.
Okay. So that's interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No. And the only other thing I was going to say in the professional aspect of it is that there used to be, and it's something that it really annoys me when it's just talking to people 20, maybe I'm going to say 10 to 20 years older than myself, who are still in the workforce at the moment, that they seem to have not noticed the general shift on how disputes and things are handled. But now that they are here and they want to daydream about the good old days while not accepting that the problems that we're all facing now. Because I would say to them, for instance, like back in the day, we used to have meetings every month where we would be able to talk out stuff, and if this happened, then we would be able to do this. And now we can't do that because that's a form of bullying, and it's been dictated by HR and all this sort of stuff. We can't even actually contact our own HR anymore because it is a form of threatening of the manager. That sort of useless bullcrap.
I have noticed a stark difference in people's conflict resolution style and skills pre-zero tolerance school policy and then post. That's been a sea change. Yeah. Okay, so we've got, Mary just said fostering communication essentially is what conflict does for him. So with you, it's meeting needs.
Yeah, well, even down to the medical side as well. Whenever I've had to fight, I bring up the care just because I had that responsibility and stuff that I dealt with. I had to fight for my mum's medical care a lot more than I should have for a place that has free healthcare here. And yet the amount of times I've had to say, stop pushing this thing, it's not going to bleed. They try and squeeze something out of a stone and it's like, move on to the next thing. It's just not going to happen. They must have tried to dissect my mum's spine about 18 different ways, because my mum's spine, a bit of that, if you're curious, it's just where the plates of your back, So those sections, two are crushed together and cause instead of it going straight or going in a single curve, it wiggles. That's why she says
has that form, not the gaps in the vertebrae.
So but it was caused by a car accident. So that's yeah. So and they've tried to straighten her out. They tried to put her in chiropractor where her back naturally is supposed to be that way, and they tried to straighten her out. That's the equivalent of trying to bend someone on a 90-degree angle backwards. That's just not going to work.
Oh my God.
Because my mother is deemed the person who is ill, I am the one who is half her age deemed more responsible to talk about her care, which I then have to forcefully kind of shove back onto her going, well, what do you think, mother, who is actually dealing with this? Is this right? Because I cannot just start talking on her behalf. But one of the weirdest situations is, and if anyone has ever had to deal with this, you'll know, you are the responsible one up until a point of when you go, I need help. At which point, that's not my job. You should be able to find someone to do that, or you're the one who chose to do it in the first place. But up until then, you aren't given a choice. You're just expected to do it. But when it comes to conflict resolution, a lot of the times, especially when you're trying to get something from somebody to improve, you can't lose your cool. You don't have that capability because they close that door on you. You're done. I couldn't lose it with medical doctors because my mom couldn't drive at the time. So it's either a local doctor or we're just screwed. They move us to the closest next one. It's a 40-minute bus journey. My mom can't get on buses.
And they know it. Yeah.
They know it. So I'm trying to complain to medical boards, trying to complain to head of, chief of staff and all this sort of thing. It doesn't do anything. We all know it doesn't do anything unless I actually prove a form of abuse has happened or a form of, and it sounds so bad to say, I would prefer for them to call me a homophobic slur because at least that's something I could get done with. Like, please call me that I could actually get something done here versus just saying that they're not treating my mother appropriately for a disabled woman constantly in pain.
Yeah.
It's so strange. Sometimes a fight that you need to happen doesn't happen the way you need it to, and it just leaves you in a worse situation.
It's very vulnerable with disability stuff. I deal with that with friends and clients, and it is maddening. All right, so let's pause and digest that. That was heavy in a good way. I think a lot of people are struggling with the system right now and can relate to a lot of that. So we'll take a quick break to pivot our mindset because we're gonna go to Akila after the break, and Akila is in the military, so she's no stranger to conflict, and I'm really looking forward to her answer after the break. If you like what you hear, if any of the Bubbleheads stories resonate with you, please join us at our Healthy Conflict Workshop on Sunday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's a Zoom workshop, so you can join from anywhere in the world, anywhere in Canada, any way you are. We want to have you, but there's only 15 tickets left. So go to nottherapyshow.com. We'll see you there, and we'll see you after the break. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist, and this is still It's Not Therapy, talking the purposes of conflict. Stay tuned. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking the purposes of conflict. Now, we've heard from Mary just about the purposes of conflict, and we've heard from Jake about the purposes of conflict. And now we're going to go to Akila, who's a veteran of the 101st Airborne. I think I said that correctly. Anyway, Akila, I'm sure you have a different perspective on it, because I mean you've experienced a very different kind of conflict being in the military. So I'm with you. I'm interested not just what conflict does in your experience, but also how, because I know that other people I've talked to have come out of the military and had to return to civilian life have had adapting issues with the culture because all of a sudden things don't make sense. Is this consistent with your experience, and how does that frame your approach to conflict?
Oh, you like to ask easy questions.
It's
Okay.
me.
So I've just across my lifetime, I've experienced uh more kinds of conflict than I'm probably willing to admit. I've done customer service, I've done retail, I've worked as a server, um, I've worked in corporate environments, I've done sales. I was in the military for 13 years. So if there's a kind of conflict, there's a good chance I've had contact with it, either directly or from somebody else. What does conflict do? Well, it all depends on the conflict that I'm having and who I'm having it with. If I'm fighting with a friend, oddly, it winds up strengthening the relationship because we push each other to the limit, and then we find out, oh, there's once we're at our wits' end, we can get down to business, see what was at the bottom of the conflict. Now, that doesn't always work with all friend groups, but because I tend to have more cerebral friends, that's what it winds up doing. Now, I've had instances where that irrevocably broke the friendship because they weren't as invested in the relationship than I was. So that's one thing that can come out of it. I was just terminated from my last job essentially because I was too military. Even though I've been out for 6 years.
Oh, is that what it ended up being?
Chances are.
That makes sense.
That's you know, every conversation that I was having, it's sort of like that, it was leading me in that direction. Because they saw me as a woman. They expected me to relate as a woman. And I'm not at that point yet. I haven't learned those skills. And it was a bridge too far. I had and am having a very hard time with the deprogramming because there's so many shorthands in the military. Everyone knows where everyone else is in the pecking order just by looking at their chest or their epaulets or whatever, depending on the uniform. It's all there. You know what unit they're in. You can estimate what sort of unit culture they have based on a patch. It's all there if you know the metaphors. I spent a lot of my time at the 101st, and there was a distinct culture. Now, even though there were other airborne units, they had wildly different cultures in terms of leadership, esprit de corps, all of that. And when you got shuffled around, which invariably happened, those cultures came into conflict with each other because for me, I had a guy come in and was fresh off the trail and thought that he was going to, or the drill sergeant trail. I'm using metaphors that may not be in evidence.
We've done fresh off the boat. Now we've done fresh off the trail, and they mean different things.
Yeah. So they were used to dealing with civilians coming into the army, turning them into soldiers, and then came to unit where we were all not all of us, but most of us were not only longtime soldiers, but working at peak efficiency. So they were having a difficult time making that adjustment, and especially dealing with someone of lower rank that they couldn't order around, because I was owned by the full bird, and I couldn't jump to his beat because I had competing assignments from somebody that outranked everybody in the unit. So that was professional conflict. I was in abusive marriage, so that's a whole different, and that taught me a lot about myself. And the good thing about that is it stripped away all of the things that I thought were necessary that weren't.
So
And
conflict for you helps you understand what's important.
yes, and it shows how strong things are between me and another person. And it's different because I try and learn something from each individual conflict. Now, I've been in conflicts where there was nothing to be learned.
Yeah.
Well, when you're taking rockets from the enemy and you have to return fire, there's not a whole lot to be learned.
Yeah.
Now I have learned that I can keep my cool in some unbelievably stressful circumstances. We were out on patrol, and we had come to a security halt, and we had all 4 trucks pointed in different directions, and I was in the gun turret of my truck. And we were stopping all the cars and diverting them off to a side street to go around the block and then continue on behind us. And this guy in a truck didn't stop. So we were expecting a VBED, vehicle-borne IED. And I was authorized to shoot. So we got the truck stopped at a uncomfortably close distance, but he wound up unharmed. His truck had a few minor holes, and he walked away with a very rapid heartbeat and some minor scratches.
That's a good result in that scenario.
Yeah. I was very unhappy that I was on the particular gun, a 249, which is a 5.56 machine gun. I really wanted something more substantial. The one time I was in a situation that was about to go kinetic, that I was on the 50 cal, I wound up holding my fire because the enemy was massing at a school. And you don't shoot schools. It's just not a thing.
Yeah.
So Bennett, got something, Jake? Okay.
Everybody's just,
What's up?
this is why I left tequila for last on this question, because I knew there'd be gold here. So, I mean, I think this is an example of how experience really affects how people come into conflict and what the expectations are and how you go about it. One of the things I do know is based on experiences, what is considered important and worth fighting over. Individual mileage varies significantly. And I mean, for me, I've got a completely different reason for conflict. To me, it's to solve problems. And I know that could be exceptionally annoying. Yep.
I apologize. There was one other thing that I learned out of conflict that's
Yeah.
really important, not just what's important to me, but what's important to the person I'm having a conflict with. How, when, where, and why do they fight tells me about them.
Yeah. Motivations are really, really important. And that was why, you're talking about the Myers-Briggs and what it does and doesn't do before we started recording. And for me, that why people do the things they do is essential to me, because I am that annoying type of fixer person who, yes, this isn't important, let's just solve the problem. And that's where I got into a lot of trouble. I learned that sometimes the conversation has to breathe, because it isn't about solutions. It's about the why the person was upset, what was at the core of the emotional response. And through working on that, because it's like, I was an INTJ, I'm now an INFJ. If you don't know what that means, don't worry. Dharma Kunjalat Tanagra. That was a Star Trek reference. And so, yeah. And so what I learned was that as well, that slowing down is not a waste of time. This productivity thing drives me crazy, because getting your team to have a deeper understanding of each other is, I think, the most productive thing you can do. And hopefully we've done that on this episode. How was that for a segue? I'm really proud of myself. I hope you are too. Back pat for me. Jake, Akila, Mary just from the car, and special appearance by Asher, Mary Jess' husband. Jake, was that your partner there in the background just now?
Yeah, he just decided to wander in.
All right, it's a family event, and we want you to be part of our family, proverbially, not legally. That would be creepy. Anyway, I'm starting to get punchy, and we are going to the last segment of the show. If you want to join us this Sunday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for our Healthy Conflict Workshop, the Bubbleheads will be there. Moi Moi will be there as well, who could not join us this week. We will all be there. Go to nottherapyshow.com for tickets. There are only 13 left. 13 tickets left. Join us, please. We'd love to have you. The last workshop we did on how to stop beating yourself up was a great time. This proves to be, this promises to be similar. I'm losing my ability to speak. Oh my God. Anyway, one more segment. We will get through. I promise. I will be back with final thoughts. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still semi-coherent. This is still It's Not Therapy. We still have one more segment to go. Back in a bit. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. It is just me now, you and me, and we're talking final thoughts. But first, final thoughts on the purposes of conflict. And if you want to work on your conflict resolution skills, we have a panel coming up in a few days. Our Healthy Conflict panel via Zoom. Go to nottherapyshow.com to get tickets. There are only about a dozen left on nottherapyshow.com. The workshop is Sunday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Please join us. We picked that time because Europe, it's the middle of the night in Australia, unfortunately. But yes, I have clients in Australia. Yes, I'm kind of a big deal. I'm kidding. But yeah, anywhere else, if you'd love to join us, we'd love to have you. It's going to be a good time. Very informative. I always learn as much as I teach in these, and you get to meet the Bubbleheads. But I want to do final thoughts on conflict, because I know a lot of people fear conflict, avoid conflict. It is not possible to avoid conflict. A lot of my top 10 phrases are designed to make conflict somewhat easier. When I say don't let problems that aren't your fault become mistakes that are, lead to mistakes that are, or when I say healthy goals are based on things you can control, or when I say be the hero of your own story and not anyone else's, or if I say perfect is a lie, stop trying to be perfect, listen twice before you talk once, we could keep going. They're all in some ways dealing with managing conflict and struggle. And you guys know I love superheroes. Now, a superhero trope is the first time two superheroes meet, they fight. And this defines pretty much every close relationship I have in my life. I have met many, many dear friends through hot takes I have dropped somewhere in public. And this is very important. When I was much younger, I did fear conflict. When I got somewhat older, I became terrified by conflict. It never went my way. I lost every fight. And that got understatement of the century really hard. A person cannot go through life always losing. Now, sometimes it's very cut and dried. That's the nice thing about sports. There's a winner, there's a loser. Well, sometimes it's up for debate, but usually it's fairly clear cut. And that's why we like these activities. It's simple, it's easy, the rules are obvious. Life is not like that. And this is why I focus on goals and boundaries. Another big one. Top 10 phrase. Other people don't have to like your boundaries. They do have to respect them. And that was something I really needed to learn when it came to conflict. Because I couldn't do what I do if I didn't have a high degree of empathy for people. And I have this really unfortunate thing about myself. It doesn't matter how terrible a person is. If they are hurting, I hurt. It's the suck thing about empathy. But what I learned is that's feedback. Hurt people, that's true. But understanding that someone's hurt is only one part of it. Knowing what to do next is the lion's share of effective resolution. And one thing I learned, and this was invaluable, and it's one of the tough things that my team has to learn, that I will have the smaller fight early so we don't have to have the big fight later. Happy math, right? Small fight early on means we can avoid the really big rumble, later. That's good happy math. That minimizes pain, maximizes closeness, maximizes connection, magnifies communication. Good happy math. But it's terrifying for people at first. And I get that. I have embraced that I am scary. I host a writers group. It's one of my It's Not Therapy projects, and they are incredibly dear to me, and they paid me this incredible compliment by saying, you are crazy. You are so crazy that you went crazy and came through it. And that made me so happy, because doing hard things means going into that abyss. And that is what conflict is, right? It is the unknown. It is uncomfortable. It is hard. But there's a right way to do it. There's a few right ways to do it, and a lot of wrong ways to do it. And then on top of right or wrong, some things that are obviously right, some things that are obviously wrong. Like, don't name call, try not to mind read, don't anticipate, don't assume. All that's, well, I'd say it's common sense, but common sense is neither. But then there are conflict styles. And I understand not everyone is where I'm at regarding conflict. Conflict aversion is real. And that's not something that people can unlearn overnight. That is a skill that was formed usually in childhood, usually because of a very unstable home or school or being horribly bullied or something that made you feel like you couldn't win. So don't fight. And when you come into adulthood, you have to unlearn that. And that's terrifying. And that's the first hurdle people have to get over. And that's where boundaries come in. Boundaries are not limits. Boundaries are the fence around your property line, not your front door. Because the whole point is if you're pausing people at your fence, you can choose who gets to your front door. And then you can choose who you let in your house. And obviously, stopping somebody at your property line feels way safer than at your front door or having to remove them from your home. So boundaries are essential to healthy conflict. And boundaries are not about controlling the other person. They're about deciding what you will and will not accept. And no one has the right to determine that for you but you. And this is one of the things we're going to get into in our Healthy Conflict Workshop, nottherapyshow.com for tickets. Only about 12 left, nottherapyshow.com. It's Sunday, June 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time via Zoom. Please join us wherever you are in the world. I know people listen from all around the world. I'm going to take the week off next week to recover from this workshop and catch up some other work my clients need me. But then we'll be back with, if the guest comes through, a very, very interesting, very, very tender story. I'm looking forward to it and dreading it in equal measures because digging into the tough stuff is part of what we do here. Until then, you know it's coming. Your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. Or hurting other people that don't deserve it. But remember, small hurts early to prevent the big harms later. Healthy conflict, productive conflict is a good thing. Yes, I am crazy, but a good crazy. Embrace your good crazy. Fight the good fight. I could spend the next 15 seconds doing really, really cheesy dad jokes and metaphors just to fill time. Instead, I'm awesome. You're awesome. See you next time.